Have a look. Indira turned her head with mild trepidation, which disappeared as soon as she saw the finished product. Wow, it's gorgeous. The slender green vine wove its way up her inner arm with 4 delicate leaves sprouting off in a perfectly shadowed trunk pluie. It looked real, and the faint shifts of green in the leaves made it seem like they were swaying in the breeze of a sun-dappled glade. The doctor smiled. Thanks. I like to do work that's more than just functional. I have an MFA in art, but it didn't take long to realize that an MFA doesn't pay the bills. So I went into med school. Sounds like the perfect career for you then. The woman working on her arm didn't seem old enough to have gone through graduate school and med school, but with the cosmetic implants available these days, you never knew. Well, it rules out the squeamish artist, that's for sure. She set the tattoo gun down and wiped the skin again. There, all the leaves are keyed to the same readout, but they can be reprogrammed if you get other med tattoos later on. I like to leave room for growth. Haha, yeah, no pun intended or anything. Dr. Tahari set to cleaning up, carefully sealing the ink pots. They went into a clear box along with Indira's vial. More quality assurance. If something went wrong, not that it would, the ink and serum would be available for testing. The box was labeled with Indira's name and patient number and then sealed with biohazard tape. By the time the workspace was clean, the gel was ready to come off. Dr. Tahari wiped it away gently, cleaning the skin again, and applied a few pumps of a fine, cold aerosol mist. This will seal it up and heal it, so don't worry about bumping it in on anything or getting it wet, but it'll stay a little tender for the next day or two. We'll let your immune system recover, and tomorrow we'll test it out and make sure it works. Indira grimaced. Yeah, that's the part I'm really looking forward to. After her recent hospital stay and the enforced leave of absence from work, the last thing she wanted to do was tempt anaphylaxis for fun. Tahari shook her head. Don't worry, it'll be fine. The cells will all be settled in their new home, ready to pump out antidote before you even realize you need it. Indira saw the headline on the flight home. Gannon and Perez beat rap over display synchronization. Dan had lost her case. By the time she landed, she had declined to answer 5 calls from reporters, and 1 each from Dan and Rowan. She returned Dan's call first, sitting on the bullet train from the airport and staring out the window at the blur of rainy cityscape and gray sky. You heard, he asked as soon as she picked up. What? No hello, Indira? How did it go? His voice carried the hint of a smile. Sorry. Motion to note in the record that I asked and you answered, and then we can move on to where you yell at me for losing your case. She was quiet a moment, debating her next words. If she'd been about to scream at him, and she wasn't sure if she had been or not, his candid invitation had taken away her steam. So what happened? He cleared his throat. The false positives and false negatives on the displays. We called it the same issue, lack of synchronization between display and implant. Well, they argued they were different issues with different processes and technologies and got the case dismissed. Indira took a breath, let it out, and counted to 10. She wondered if Dr. Tahari could implant Ativan without a prescription, or maybe tequila. They conned you, Dan. They always try to make that argument. If I'd been, but you weren't, hotshot. His voice softened. I had to cover this one because you were too stubborn to take care of yourself. Yeah, I've been hoping you'd get the damn thing, but not like this. You had to make a point about how you had it all under control and you blew it. What, so 2 wrongs make an excuse? She retorted and sighed. I'm sorry. Look, I'm almost at my stop. I'll see you tomorrow. The deadbolt lock thunked over and Indira spilled into the apartment. Bale slunk out of the bedroom, a little orange fuzzball meowing reproaches at her. She picked him up, rubbing her cheek against his soft fur. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I know Mrs. Ming gives you tuna when I'm gone, so I don't know what you're complaining about. The crisp, faint, metallic smell of the ozonator hung in the air. Indira smiled, carrying the cat with her into the kitchen. I think we can both use a treat, huh? She stopped short at the sight of a huge bouquet of flowers. With her free hand, she flicked over the card tied to the vase. It was a generic get well soon, signed only G and P. Well, that was odd. Mrs. Ming must have accepted the delivery for her. Setting Bale down on the counter, Indira pulled the milk carton from the fridge, giving it a sniff before she poured some into a saucer for the cat. For herself, she grabbed a spoon and a pint of ice cream, chocolate with chocolate chunks. Indira settled into the armchair by the window. In the light, the glimmer of the tap caught her eye. Pensively, she watched the kids at the park down the street as she opened the carton. Did you know it's impossible to get good ice cream in a hospital? She remarked to the cat, who lapped at his milk and ignoring her. We can put a colony on Mars, but apparently hospitals can't serve ice cream that doesn't have freezer burn. She sat back and let the first spoonful of chocolate melt on her tongue. The inside of her mouth tingled, starting to itch. A jolt of panic jerked her upright before she even had time to think about it. The itch had already spread down her throat, around her mouth. Her hand went automatically to her throat as if she could stop the swelling that would cut off her air. The shock of epinephrine hit her bloodstream with the subtlety of a tsunami. The itching and swelling washed away, replaced by the quivering, twitchy sensation of adrenaline rush. She sat back, gasping. Breathe. She clung to the mantra like the last EpiPen in a perfume department. I can breathe. I can breathe. The adrenaline was what was making her heart race. It had been released by the med tap, just as it was supposed to be. The hospital. Her hand twitched at the urge to call 911, but no, that wasn't necessary anymore. The med tap would provide all the follow-up monitoring and medicine, and it was self-diagnostic. It would tell her if there was a problem it couldn't handle, or if it was malfunctioning. Did that include causing her to react to something she'd never been allergic to before? She shoved up her sleeve. The leaves were fading from brown to yellow to green again. Bale jumped up on her lap, pacing back and forth from chair arm to chair arm, seeking the most comfortable spot from which to demand more attention. The phantom itch in her mouth was her imagination. Mrs. Ming must have a new man in her life, she remarked to Bale, her voice trembling with aftershock. Probably got a new perfume and forgot all about it, right? She petted the cat, hoping the smooth, repetitive motion would help calm her, too. Did she smell funny? It was always possible. People forgot when it wasn't their allergy, their life. And the tattoo had done exactly what she needed it to do, exactly what she'd gotten it for. She was starting to shake, the after effects of adrenaline rush that had saved her life. The ice cream went back in the freezer, and Indira needed to lie down. So let's see it. Dan crossed Indira's office in 3 of his long-legged strides and opened envelope in his hand. Indira turned her arm so that he could see the climbing green vine. I was thinking of getting spiders, but I didn't want to scare you, she teased. He chuckled, hovering his fingers just above the tattoo. He was too polite to actually touch without asking. Dormant, the display shimmered slightly, making the leaves sway. Scare yourself, most like. No way you'd get a spider tat. You never know, the doctor had a snake. It was interesting, and she was cute. Dan snorted and sat back, crossing his arms. As a reflex, he glanced at the open files on her screen, peering more closely when a name caught his attention. Gannon and Perez? You've got a new case? Indira collapsed the window. Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. He shook his head. I thought you'd be less the crusader now, or that you'd pick a new target. She bit back a sharp response. I'm not a crusader, I'm just doing my job. So what's with the case files then, if there's no case pending? Research? He gave her a suspicious frown. Why? Because it's my idea of a fun time on a Thursday night? Sheesh, Dan, you'd think you caught me mapping out a bank robbery or something. He snorted. Good luck with that one, hotshot. Stealthy you are not. Dan handed her the envelope he carried. For a high-tech company, Gannon and Perez sometimes like to do things the traditional way. From the envelope, Indira pulled a crisply folded piece of letterhead. It was a smarmy, generic letter thanking her practice for their concern for the well-being of G&P's patients and continuing with the assurance that the problems were being addressed. Indira recognized it as the form letter that was sent to any patient who contacted customer service with a complaint. Rather than bearing the form letter's usual stamped signatures, though, it looked like it had been personally signed by Gannon and Perez themselves. She returned it to the envelope and looked at the front. It was addressed directly to Dan. Wow, gloating much? She said. I'm sorry, Dan, they're bastards. She returned the letter to him and sat back with a stifled sigh. Thought you'd want to see it, he said with a rueful smirk. Enjoy your research. Next time we'll kick their asses. He moseyed out of her office and she returned to her screen. She had no desire to share her real purpose, not with Dan or anyone. The details of her first case against Gannon and Perez were exactly as she remembered them. The patient had a bee sting allergy. The med tat had seemed a life-saving miracle until the patient began to react to allergens that had not been triggers for her before, and eventually died of a heart attack after a cascade of allergic reactions, one after the other, and the eventual overdose of adrenaline. The lawsuits had come in a flood at first, but slowed in time. After each case Indira won, additional safeguards were put in place to make med tat technology safer. The monitoring modules were improved so that the tattoo would confirm medicine levels already present in the blood before administering more. The technology was more carefully calibrated to the individual patient's physiology, their history of sensitivity to medications, and their past reactions. At least one backup treatment was available if the primary treatment was not advisable. Remedies for a patient's most likely side effects or overdose reactions were now coded into every med tab, and there was a transmitter as a last resort to call for paramedics if conditions suggested an uncontrolled or dangerous reaction. Tens of thousands of allergy patients now wore the med tab, and there had never been another malfunction that created new allergies on top of old ones like that first one, like a chocolate allergy when it had always and only been perfumes. The chocolate didn't send her to the medical center, but the next set of symptoms did. Dermatomyositis, Dr. Haskins said. I beg your pardon? The doctor took the other chair in front of her desk rather than the one behind it. The rashes and the muscle pain, she said. It's an autoimmune disorder that affects the muscles and skin. The exact cause is unknown, but one theory is that it's a viral infection of the muscles. I know what it is, doctor, Indira said, stunned. Treatment, but no cure, right? It was the second case I prosecuted against Gannon and Perez. Dr. Haskins propped her elbow on the thick armrest, chin in hand, as she examined Indira. Dermatomyositis is pretty surprising in a healthy woman under 40. Yes, Indira said quietly. I know. You were here just a month ago. Were you already having symptoms and not sharing them with me? Of course not. I'm not sure a natural case of dermatomyositis could develop that quickly.
They were once known as angels from the sky.